Not every vacation ends with laughter and photographs. Some end with whispers in empty corridors, with doors that shouldn't exist, with loved ones who suddenly were never there. What you're about to hear are 5 true encounters, rechecked and verified from real experiences and Reddit confessions. Stories from passengers who stepped onto cruise ships expecting relaxation, and instead found themselves trapped in nightmares that refused to let go. These are not campfire tales. They're first-hand accounts. And once you hear them, you'll understand why some people never book another cruise again. So, dim the lights, keep your eyes open, and whatever you do, don't listen alone. This is Midnight Outcry. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell icon so you never miss a night like this, and share your thoughts in the comments below, because what if your story is next? Story 1. I want to start this by saying, cruises are supposed to be escapes. There's supposed to be laughter under neon lights, endless buffets, pools that glow at night, and that slow, gentle rocking that lulls you to sleep. But what happened on the Atlantic Meridian wasn't an escape. It was a trap that still hasn't let go of me. My name's Rachel. I was 29 when this happened, traveling alone for the first time. Everyone thought I was brave. Solo cruise, that's bold, they said. But I wasn't looking for adventure. I was running. From a breakup, from a job I hated, from the feeling that I had no idea who I was anymore. A week at sea sounded like the perfect reset button. The first few days were fine, normal. Dinner buffets, reading by the pool, making awkward small talk with couples twice my age. I kept mostly to myself, which is why it struck me as odd when someone actually sought me out. Her name was Emily. She was maybe mid-30s, sharp eyes, restless energy, the kind of person who never seemed fully relaxed, even when she smiled. She introduced herself at breakfast one morning, and within minutes, it felt like we'd known each other for years. There was something magnetic about her, something I didn't recognize at first, but soon I'd wish I never had. The first red flag came the very next night. We were on deck, leaning against the railing, watching the waves slip by like ink under the moon. Emily lowered her voice and asked, "Have you noticed it?" "Noticed what?" She tilted her head. "The missing people." I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. There were over 3,000 passengers when we left port. We're not even halfway, and people are vanishing, quietly, without anyone saying a word. I frowned. "That's impossible. They'd announce it. There'd be alarms." Emily leaned closer. Her breath smelled faintly of wine, but her eyes were dead serious. "They don't announce it because it isn't supposed to be happening." At first, I thought she was just paranoid, maybe even drunk, but then I started to notice things too. Our dinner waiter gone. No explanation, just replaced overnight. The older couple that had been seated near me at every breakfast, suddenly absent. Their table cleared, their cabin dark. I asked a steward casually, pretending not to care. He froze, then forced a smile so fake it made my stomach twist. "I'm afraid I don't know who you mean, miss." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing it, a shuffle of feet outside my cabin door. A knock, faint and irregular, like someone pressing their knuckles against the wood but unsure if they wanted me to answer. When I finally opened it, no one was there. Just wet footprints leading down the hallway. Emily's theory only got darker. They're not leaving, not being airlifted out, not disembarking. They're still here, below us. Somewhere under the decks, passengers aren't allowed to go. She said she'd seen it herself, 2 crew members guiding a dazed-looking man down a restricted stairwell near the stern. He didn't struggle, didn't speak, just walked like he was half asleep. And then, gone. I told myself not to believe her, to stop letting this paranoia creep under my skin. But it was too late, because once you see the gaps, you can't unsee them. People were vanishing, and nobody wanted to talk about it. The night everything changed. Emily knocked on my door just past midnight. Her face was pale, her hair tangled, her eyes wide. "They're coming for me," she whispered. Before I could answer, she slipped inside, shutting the door hard behind her. I asked what she meant, but she just shook her head, clutching my arm like a child. "Don't let them take me. Don't let them—" Her words cut off, because at that exact moment, someone knocked. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on my cabin door. The knocks didn't stop. 3 slow taps, then silence. Emily clutched my arm so hard her nails dug into my skin. I whispered, "Who is it?" But no one answered. Then 3 more knocks. Louder, this time. I could feel the vibration through the thin metal of the door. Emily shook her head violently, pressing her finger to her lips. "Don't move." For a long, suffocating moment, we just stood there, barely breathing. My heart was hammering so loud, I swore whoever was outside could hear it. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the knocking stopped. I waited another 30 seconds before I even dared to step forward. I pressed my eye against the peephole. The hallway was empty. But there was something else. A folded piece of paper on the floor slid halfway under my door. Emily snatched it before I could react, her hands trembling as she unfolded it. I leaned in over her shoulder. 4 words, scrawled in messy, uneven handwriting. "We know about you." Emily gasped like she'd been struck. She crumpled the note instantly, shoved it deep into her pocket. "They're watching," she whispered. "We need to stay in the open. Don't stay locked away. They take people easier that way." I stared at her. "Who is they? The crew? Someone else?" Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't answer. The next morning, Emily was gone. Her things vanished from her cabin. The steward swore it had never been occupied. I tried arguing, demanding to see the guest log, but he just stared at me with that same fixed plastic smile. "Perhaps you're mistaken, miss. Traveling alone can play tricks on memory." I wanted to scream at him, to shake him, but I didn't, because behind him, at the far end of the hall, I saw 2 men in white uniforms just standing, not moving, not speaking, watching me, and when I blinked, they were gone. That night, I went to the dining hall alone. The clinking of silverware, the soft murmur of passengers, the hum of the engines, it should have been comforting, but I kept noticing gaps. Tables set for people who never showed, waiters glancing nervously at the door. And then something worse. I saw her, Emily, across the room. But she wasn't sitting, wasn't eating. She was just standing behind the glass doors that led to the deck, staring inside. Her face blank, her eyes hollow, her skin pale as paper. I shot to my feet, chair scraping against the floor, and hurried toward her. The moment I opened the doors, she was gone. Only the night air and the endless ocean waited for me. That was the moment I stopped trying to rationalize it. Emily hadn't just disappeared. She'd been taken, and if I wasn't careful, I would be next. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound from the hallway, the shuffle of shoes, the clang of pipes, the low murmur of voices made me sit up in bed, clutching the lamp like a weapon. By 3 a.m., I couldn't take it anymore. If the ship wanted me paranoid, it had already succeeded. If I sat here waiting, I'd lose my mind. So I made a choice. I was going to find out what was happening on this ship on my own. The first step was simple: blend in. During the day, I acted normal. I smiled at other passengers. I joined a trivia game in the lounge. I even forced myself to eat at the buffet. But my eyes never stopped scanning, watching, listening. And that's when I noticed it. Certain crew members, the ones in plain white uniforms, never touched food, never drank water, never spoke unless spoken to. They just existed, moving silently through the ship, always in pairs, always watching. And sometimes if I stared too long, one would suddenly vanish, like turning your head away from a shadow and finding it gone when you look back. That night, I waited until the hall outside my cabin was empty. I stuffed a flashlight into my jacket pocket and slipped out, moving as quietly as I could. The corridors looked different at night, colder, the lighting harsher, buzzing faintly overhead. The carpet absorbed my footsteps like I was walking deeper into something alive. I passed cabins, crew-only doors, storage closets, until finally, at the very end of the hall, I found it. A stale door, marked only with a red warning sign, authorized personnel only. And beneath it, in faint, almost invisible letters scratched into the paint, "Don't look too long. My heart hammered, but I turned the handle. Unlocked. Inside was a narrow stairwell leading down. The hum of the engines grew louder, echoing through the walls. The air was damp, tinged with salt and metal. Halfway down, I heard it whispers. Not words, just fragments. Layered voices, hundreds at once, murmuring from deep below, and underneath them faint footsteps. Someone was coming. I killed my flashlight instantly and pressed myself against the wall. 2 shadows passed below me. 2 white uniforms, their heads tilted at unnatural angles, like puppets whose strings had been cut. I held my breath, not daring to move, until the sound of their steps faded into the hum of the engines. At the bottom of the stairs, I found another door, heavier, rusted. My fingers shook as I pulled it open, and what I saw made my stomach drop. Rows of metal chairs, dozens of them, all bolted to the floor, facing a massive glass wall. Beyond the glass, dark water, black and endless. But pressed against the glass, staring in, were faces, pale, bloated, distorted by the sea. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. And right in the center, Emily. Her lips moved slowly, silently. Her hand lifted, pointing directly at me. The whispers surged louder, filling my head. "We know about you. We know." I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a chair. The hum of the engines shifted, almost like the ship itself was reacting to me. And then I heard footsteps again, louder, closer. They were coming back. I turned and bolted for the stairwell, the sound of pursuit echoing behind me. I didn't stop running until my lungs burned. By the time I slammed my cabin door shut behind me, I was shaking so hard I could barely turn the lock. My reflection in the mirror looked like a stranger, wide eyes, pale skin, hair plastered to my forehead with sweat. Emily. Her face pressed against the glass, reaching for me. It couldn't be real. It couldn't. But the scratches on my jacket sleeve, the smell of rust and salt on my clothes, that was real. And worse, the whispers were still in my head. The next morning, the cruise carried on like nothing had happened. Children splashed in the pool. Waiters carried trays of cocktails. Music floated lazily over the deck. But I couldn't unsee the faces. I couldn't unhear the voices. And when I spotted one of the white uniformed crew members watching me from across the buffet line, I knew they knew what I'd seen. That night, I didn't leave my cabin. Not by choice. Because I couldn't. At 1:17 a.m., the knock came. Not gentle, not polite, a commanding knock. "Sir, please step out." I froze. Another knock, harder. "This is for your safety." Their voices were too even, too calm. Like recordings on repeat. I didn't move. After a long pause, the handle rattled. The lock held, but then I heard something worse. A second voice, a whisper, from inside my cabin. I spun around, flashlight in hand. The beam cut through the dark landing on the corner of the room. Emily. She was crouched there, pale, dripping, her hair clinging to her face. Her eyes locked on mine, unblinking. "You shouldn't have looked," she said softly. "Now they'll take you too." I stumbled back, my hand striking the lamp. It toppled, shattering. When I looked again, she was gone. Only a wet outline remained on the carpet, already fading. The knocking stopped. Silence pressed in from every side. And then, faintly from the intercom, "All passengers, please be advised. Observation Deck 9 is closed tonight for maintenance." Deck 9, the same deck the crew had warned me about. I couldn't stay locked in the cabin any longer. If they were coming for me, I'd rather face them head on than wait like prey. So, against every instinct screaming in my head, I left. The ship's hallways were different again, narrower. The lights dimmer, the air thicker. I followed the signs, though they seemed to shift as I moved. Down 2 corridors, past a stairwell, until finally I saw it. Deck 9, observation access. The door was chained, padlocked, sealed with tape. But the tape was old, the lock was rusted, and carved into the door with deep, desperate scratches were 3 words: "Don't go in." My hand hovered on the lock. Every fiber of me screamed to stop, but my curiosity, the same trait that had ruined everything, pushed me forward. The lock gave with a loud snap. The door swung inward. And what lay beyond made my stomach twist. Rows of passengers strapped into chairs, eyes wide, faces blank. They weren't dead. They weren't alive either. They just stared at the massive glass wall ahead of them. The same wall I'd seen. Only now, the faces outside were clearer. Pressed against the glass, watching, mimicking, whispering. And in the center chair, eyes vacant but locked on mine, Emily. The sight of them, rows of passengers strapped to chairs, staring blankly at that massive pane of glass, froze me in place. Their faces were slack, breathing shallow, pupils dilated like they were caught between sleep and death. But Emily's eyes locked on mine. I whispered her name, my voice cracking. Emily. No response, not a blink. Then I realized her lips were moving, almost imperceptibly, forming silent words. Get out. My legs felt like lead. My heart hammered against my ribs. But before I could take a step toward her, a voice rang out behind me. You weren't supposed to see this. I spun. A man in officer's white stood at the doorway. No name tag, no insignia. His face calm, expressionless, like he'd practiced it for years. This is where the ship keeps balance, he said softly, almost kindly. Every voyage, a few are chosen. Not random those who look too closely, those who don't accept the surface story. My throat dried. Chosen? For what? He tilted his head toward the glass. The faces outside, dozens, maybe hundreds, pressed closer, their outlines warping in the dark water. My breath caught when I realized some of them looked familiar. Passengers I'd seen earlier on the deck. Families. A man I'd shared drinks with. Even a waiter who'd poured my coffee. All of them gone from the ship. Here, in the water. They watch, the officer said. And those inside must watch back. It's the exchange. Observation for observation. Without it, the vessel fails. Emily's lips moved again, this time louder, breaking through the silence. Run! The officer's head snapped toward her, his calm mask cracking for a second. Then he turned back to me. You can leave now, he said. Or you can take your seat. It doesn't matter. The ship already has its eyes on you. I stepped backward, hand fumbling for the doorframe. My instinct screamed at me to run. But my curiosity, the damn curiosity, wanted to know more. What happens if I leave? I asked. The officer's smile was thin, bloodless. You'll never stop seeing us. I bolted. The corridor stretched, twisted, but I kept running. My breath tore my chest open with every step. Doors slammed behind me. The hum of the engines grew louder, layered with whispers. Finally, I stumbled back into the open air of the top deck. The night sky was above me, stars scattered like fragments of glass. For one heartbeat, I thought I was safe. Then I saw them, passengers, standing motionless on the deck. Each one staring straight at me, eyes wide, unblinking. Among them, Emily. Her lips moved one last time. You don't leave. You never leave. When the ship docked 3 days later, I walked off with the crowd. No one stopped me. No one mentioned Emily, or the missing families, or the corridors that twisted like nightmares. From the outside, the cruise was just another luxury liner unloading another batch of tired, sunburned passengers. But even now, back on land, I can still hear the hum. I still see faces in glass windows on buses, in storefronts, in mirrors. And sometimes, in the corner of my eye, I see Emily watching me. The officer's words echo every time I try to sleep. You'll never stop seeing us. And he was right. I didn't escape the ship. I brought it with me. Story 2. The ocean hides its dead well. That was the first thing I heard that night, though no one had spoken it aloud. My name is Rachel Donovan. I'm 31, a registered nurse from Portland, Oregon. After the last year losing my younger brother in a car accident, grinding through double shifts at the hospital, and fighting through a haze of grief, I thought I deserved something simple. A cruise. A week on the water. A chance to breathe. I booked a last-minute ticket on the Emerald Crown, a sleek white vessel advertised as the Jewel of the Atlantic. I wasn't adventurous. I didn't need adventures. I just needed quiet, a drink on the deck, and the illusion that the world couldn't touch me. But from the first night, the ship had other plans. The Emerald Crown didn't feel right. Its halls seemed too narrow, its carpets damp beneath my shoes even when no one else noticed. The engines hummed with an undertone I couldn't place, like a second heartbeat beneath the metal. And then there was the corridor. It should have been simple 2 turns from my cabin to the lounge. But that night, when I tried to return to my room, I found myself in a hallway that shouldn't exist. The walls were darker here, lined with framed photos of the ocean, stormy and violent. No one else walked through. The air smelled of brine and rust. I checked the numbers on the doors. 402, 403, 404, then 402 again. My pulse quickened. I walked faster, but the numbers repeated, looping. At the end of the corridor, a heavy door stood ajar. Brass nameplate, mortuary access. There was no mortuary on the deck plans. Inside, faint light revealed metal drawers along the walls, the kind used for storing bodies. Most were closed. One wasn't. I stepped closer, breath sharp. A white sheet covered the figure inside. My hands trembled as I reached out against every instinct, against every warning screaming in my head, and pulled the sheet back. It was my brother. His skin pale, lips blue, eyes half-lidded. The same suit I had chosen for his burial, but his lips moved. Not fully, not like words. Just enough that I understood the shape they made. You shouldn't be here. My legs buckled. I stumbled back into the hall, the door slamming shut behind me with a metallic clang. The hum of the engines deepened, vibrating through my bones. And that's when I heard it again. The whisper, not from any human throat, but carried on the vibration of the ship itself. The ocean hides its dead well. I ran. Not gracefully, not like in a movie. I ran like a panicked animal, heart slamming in my throat, shoes squeaking against damp carpet. The corridor bent wrong, sloping downward as if the ship itself tilted, though I knew we weren't in a storm. When I finally reached a familiar section of the deck, bright lights, chatter, laughter drifting from the lounge, I had to force myself not to collapse in the middle of the hall. People passed by in shorts and sandals, holding drinks with little umbrellas, smiling like nothing was wrong. And maybe for them, nothing was. I didn't tell anyone. Not at first. Because how do you explain that you wandered into a hallway that shouldn't exist? That you saw your dead brother in a place the ship swears doesn't exist either? Still, I couldn't let it go. I went back to my cabin, tried to sleep, but every time the ship groaned or the engine thudded beneath me, I jolted awake. Around 3 a.m., unable to take the silence, I pulled out my phone and started Googling Emerald Crown cruise deaths. Emerald Crown hidden decks. Emerald Crown accidents. Nothing but cheerful blog posts, promotional videos, and a few TripAdvisor reviews complaining about the buffet. Nothing about a mortuary. Nothing about missing passengers. I was about to give up when my phone buzzed. A notification appeared at the top of the screen, an email, but not from any sender I recognized. Just a blank at .com. The subject line read, "Stop looking." I froze. My finger hovered over the screen before I opened it. Inside was only one sentence. "The corridor finds those who don't belong." My stomach dropped. I tried to screenshot it, but the email blinked out, vanishing before my eyes. My inbox was empty. The knock came less than a minute later. 3 slow raps against my cabin door. I sat there on the edge of my bed, too terrified to breathe, staring at the door handle. Another knock, louder. And then a voice, low, hoarse, barely audible through the wood. "Rachel, my name. No one on this ship should know me that well. I didn't open the door. I couldn't." I sat frozen until the silence stretched on, until exhaustion dragged me down into a restless, shallow sleep. When I woke, sunlight streamed through the tiny porthole. Passengers were laughing in the hallway. Everything looked normal. But when I opened my cabin door, a folded piece of paper lay on the floor. No handwriting, just block letters, typed Deck 7, midnight, come alone. By day, I clung to the normal. Breakfast in the dining hall, Idle chatter with strangers pretending to laugh when a kid spilled orange juice across the table. But every second, that folded paper burned in my pocket. Deck 7. Midnight. Come alone. I asked around casually, like I was just making conversation. Hey, what's on Deck 7? Do they have a gym there? The reactions were telling. One woman just blinked, confused. A bartender stiffened, then forced a smile. A crew member laughed nervously and said, "There is no Deck 7, ma'am. You must mean 6 or 8. But the way his hand trembled as he poured a drink said otherwise. By the time midnight came, my nerves were raw. I kept telling myself I wouldn't go, that I wasn't that kind of person, that the note was just some prank. But I couldn't stop thinking about my brother, the way he had looked at me in that impossible hallway, sad, desperate, knowing. So at 11:58 p.m., I was there. The stairwell down to Deck 7 was blocked by a chain, a plastic sign reading crew only. I stood frozen for almost a minute, listening to the steady thrum of the ship. Then, heart hammering, I unhooked the chain and slipped down the stairs. The air changed immediately. Colder, wet, like a basement that hadn't been aired out in years. Lights buzzed overhead, some flickering, others dead. And there it was again, the corridor. Only this time, it wasn't empty. Figures stood along the walls, dozens of them. Passengers, maybe? Their clothes were wrong older, out of style, yellowed with age. Their skin was grayish, wet, like they just climbed from the ocean. And every single one of them turned their heads toward me in perfect, unnatural unison. I almost bolted. But then a man stepped forward from the group. I knew him instantly. My brother. Except, no, it wasn't. His face was sunken, his eyes hollow. But the way he moved hesitant, almost pleading it was him. "Rach," he whispered, his voice layered with dozens of others. "You shouldn't be here." My legs felt like stone. "What is this place? Why am I seeing you?" His gaze flicked toward the others. "Because you look too long. The ship notices." It always notices. Something moved at the far end of the corridor, a shadow darker than the dark, stretching across the ceiling. The figures along the wall stiffened, as if afraid. My brother grabbed my arm. His hand was freezing. "You need to go. Now. Before it takes you to." I wanted to ask 1,000 questions. What happened to him? Why the ship hid this? What it was? But the shadow surged forward, rolling down the walls like ink spilled in water. The figures hissed in unison, their mouths opening too wide, their hollow eyes fixed on me. The ship groaned, a sound deeper than metal, almost alive. I ran. The corridor bent, lengthened, shifted beneath my feet. But somehow, I made it back to the stairwell. I scrambled up 2 steps at a time, lungs burning. When I burst onto Deck 6, everything was silent, empty. The air was warmer again. But my arm, where my brother had grabbed me, was wet. Salt water soaked through my sleeve. And written faintly on my skin, like a bruise, were words in block letters. "Do not trust the ship." For the rest of the night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I lay in my cabin staring at the ceiling, replaying every detail of that impossible corridor. The faces, my brother's voice. The words burned into my arm that had already faded to a faint purple mark. By morning, the bruise was gone, but the fear stayed. I tried to tell myself it was some waking nightmare, maybe a hallucination brought on by exhaustion. But when I opened the cabin door, I found another note on the floor. Same handwriting, same paper. This one said, "Do not speak." They are listening. I swear I looked up and down that hallway 10 times. No one was there. Just the soft hum of the ship and the faint creak of the walls, as if something inside them was shifting. The rest of the day, I kept my mouth shut. I ate lunch alone, my eyes darting to every crew member who passed. I started noticing things I hadn't before. Their pale complexions, the way some of them avoided passengers' questions with clipped smiles, how certain doors on the ship were always locked even during daylight. And then came the announcement. A cheerful female voice piped through the intercom system. "Good evening, passengers. As a reminder, please refrain from venturing into crew-only areas. Certain sections of the ship are undergoing renovations, and for your safety, access is restricted. Renovations! I almost laughed. That corridor wasn't being renovated. It was being hidden. Later that evening, I decided to test something. I went to the ship's library, a quiet little room with dusty shelves, and searched for the passenger directory on the computer terminal. My brother's name, Ethan Mallory. The system blinked at me. No record found. I tried again, scrolling through archived manifests from past voyages. Nothing. It was as if he'd never been on board, as if the ship had erased him. The screen froze, then glitched. And in the middle of the blank page, words began typing on their own. Stop digging. I slammed the laptop shut so hard, the librarian gave me a look. My hands were shaking. That night, I avoided Deck 7. But I couldn't stop thinking about the shadow that had surged toward me, the thing the figures themselves seemed terrified of. What if that wasn't the only one? What if the entire ship was alive? I know how insane it sounds. But when I pressed my ear to the cabin wall, I swore I could hear something beneath the thrum of the engines. A slow, steady heartbeat. And sometimes, in the silence between the ship's groans, a whisper too faint to make out, like the vessel itself was speaking. I didn't tell anyone about the library computer. What could I say? That my brother's name had been deleted by some phantom process, and a machine had told me to stop? No one would believe me. But inside, I felt the ship closing in. Every hallway seemed longer, the air heavier. At dinner, the lights flickered, just once, but it was enough to make a whole section of passengers gasp. The crew pretended not to notice. That was the moment I realized they weren't just hiding something. They were part of it. I couldn't stop myself. That night, I went back. Deck 7. The corridor shouldn't have been there. The blueprints I'd seen on the safety maps didn't even mark it. But there it was, stretching out endlessly again. My shoes echoed on the carpet, as if the floor itself were hollow. Halfway down, I froze. A voice, low, familiar. Rachel. It was Ethan. He was standing in the middle of the hallway, pale, eyes wide, reaching for me. But when I ran forward, the shadows behind him rippled like water. His body flickered. And then, behind him, the thing surged forward, the black tide that had terrified even the faces. Ethan screamed my name as it swallowed him whole. I should have run, but I didn't. I shouted into the dark, "What do you want from me?" The air around me bent, thick like fog, pressing in on my lungs. And then, in 100 voices at once, the corridor answered, "Stay, with us." The walls rippled. The floor quivered under my feet. Faces bloomed across the panels. Dozens, hundreds passengers, crew, people from God knows how many years of sailings. Their mouths opened in silent screams. I stumbled backward, desperate, but the corridor stretched longer, as if it wanted to keep me, and then, somehow, by some miracle, I felt solid wall behind me. My cabin door. I shoved it open, slammed it shut, and pressed my back against it. Silence. When I dared to look, the bruise on my arm was back clear this time, bold, letters burned into my skin. You were never supposed to leave. The cruise docked 2 days later. I got off, pale and shaking, like someone who hadn't slept in weeks. Nobody questioned me. Nobody asked about Ethan. And when I went to the cruise line office after we disembarked, demanding answers, they stared at me blankly. "Ma'am," the manager said, "there's no record of an Ethan Mallory ever booking with us. I don't know what's worse, that my brother is gone, or that it's like he never existed. But I can't forget the corridor. I can't forget the voices. And sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I hear the ship calling me back." If you're listening to this, take a second to subscribe to Midnight Outcry. It helps keep stories like this alive, stories I wish I didn't have to tell. Because deep down, I know this isn't over. The mark on my arm keeps coming back. And every time it fades, I hear the same whisper, "We're waiting." Story 3. Why does it smell like bleach down here? I muttered, stepping into the narrow corridor below Deck 3. The air was sharp, sterile, completely different from the usual mix of sea salt and engine oil that defined the lower decks of the Atlantic Crown. I'm Daniel Hayes, 36, an ER nurse from Philadelphia. I booked this 7-day cruise because, after 2 years of double shifts, I needed anything that wasn't fluorescent hospital lighting and constant alarms. A week of ocean views and buffets sounded like the cure, but on the third night, my curiosity got the better of me. I'd seen 2 crew members, both in white coats, not the standard Navy uniforms, carrying a stretcher through the service hallway near the stairwell. No one else noticed, nobody asked, and when I tried to follow, one of them glanced back at me with a look I can't forget, part warning, part pity. That's what brought me here. The further I went, the quieter it got. The low hum of the engines faded, until the only sound was the squeak of my sneakers against the steel floor. My phone flashlight cut a narrow path in front of me. The signs on the wall didn't match any deck map I'd seen, just numbers: 3B, 3C, 3D. Subsections passengers weren't supposed to access. At the end of the hallway, a door stood slightly ajar. Behind it, the bleach smell was overwhelming. I pushed it open. Inside was a room I shouldn't have found. Cold, silent. Stainless steel lining the walls, and along one side, a row of large metal drawers, the kind I knew too well from the hospital morgue. I froze. The ship wasn't supposed to have a morgue this size. Officially, they keep 1 or 2 refrigerated compartments for emergencies. What I was looking at could hold dozens. One of the drawers was open. A white sheet covered the form of a body. My throat went dry. I told myself not to, but I stepped closer. Slowly, carefully, I peeled the sheet back just enough to see. A middle-aged man. Gray hair, lips pale blue. Not a passenger I recognized, but his expression was twisted into something unnatural, like he had died mid-scream. My chest tightened. And then I noticed the tag tied to his wrist. Not a name, not a cabin number, just one word scrawled in black marker: witness. I staggered back, my shoulders slamming into the cold metal wall. My first thought was heart attack. My second thought, no. This was something else. The man's face didn't look peaceful, didn't look natural. And that word witness, the hairs on my arms rose as the silence pressed in. I reached for my phone, thinking I'd snap a photo. But the screen glitched. The camera app froze, pixels distorting into static before the whole thing powered down. Battery still full, but the phone refused to turn on. That's when I heard the sound. Not the hum of the ship, not footsteps. A low, wet exhale from the far end of the room. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. Slowly, I turned. Another drawer had slid open, all on its own. The sheet inside rose and fell, as if something beneath it was breathing. My stomach lurched. Hello? My voice cracked. I don't know why I said it. Maybe part of me hoped a crew member would step out, laugh, tell me it was some messed up prank. But the sheet shifted. A hand gray, waterlogged, slid out, fingers twitching. That was enough. I bolted. The door slammed shut behind me with a metallic clang that echoed down the corridor. I sprinted, heart pounding, until I found the stairwell. I didn't stop until I was 2 decks above, bent over, gasping, trying to convince myself it was exhaustion, stress, too much cheap wine at dinner. But when I reached into my pocket, my hand brushed something I hadn't put there, a folded piece of paper. I opened it with trembling fingers. 4 words, written in that same black marker. You saw too much. My knees nearly buckled. I shoved the note into my jacket and stumbled back toward the main decks, where the noise of passengers, the laughter, the clinking of glasses washed over me like a lifeline. But the normalcy felt wrong now. Too polished, too staged. Everyone's smiles looked forced, like masks barely holding in place. At dinner that night, I couldn't eat. Every time I lifted my head, someone at another table was already watching me. Crew. Passengers. Eyes flicking away too quickly when I met their gaze. The ship was alive with whispers. Not voices exactly, more like the hum of the engines carrying intent. and I kept hearing that word in my head, over and over. Witness. Sleep was impossible that night. I lay in my cabin, the ceiling light off, only the dim glow of the emergency strip running along the floor. The hum of the ship's engines was steady, almost comforting, but every so often it dipped into a strange rhythm, like a heartbeat that wasn't mine. I turned onto my side, clutching the thin blanket tighter, when a knock rattled against my door. 3 sharp taps. I froze. No one should have been there. I hadn't told anyone what I saw. No one even knew I'd gone down into the restricted decks. The knock came again slower this time, deliberate. I crept to the door, pressing my ear against the wood. Silence. Then a whisper. Not words I could make out, just a hushed, sibilant sound. I checked the peephole, but the hallway outside was empty. Only the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead. My hand hovered over the handle, my pulse racing. And then, like a jolt of ice through my veins, I realized something. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was coming from inside the room. I spun, my eyes darting around. The whispering grew louder, circling me, echoing in the air vents, in the corners, in my head. The bathroom light flicked on by itself. The mirror fogged, as though steam were pouring in, but the air was freezing cold. Slowly, letters began to appear across the glass. Witness. My chest tightened. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the chair by the desk. And that's when the phone on the nightstand rang. Not my cell, the cabin phone, the one wired into the ship's system. I picked it up with shaking hands, not even sure why I answered. For a moment, only static. Then a man's voice, low and strained, as though it was being dragged through water. You shouldn't have gone down there. Click. The line went dead. I dropped the receiver, my entire body trembling. It was only then that I remembered the piece of paper in my pocket. The warning. I pulled it out. My breath hitched. There was something new, written beneath the original words, in the same thick marker. We're not alone. I swear to God, my door unlocked by itself in that moment. The bolt clicked, slow and precise. And the handle began to turn. The handle stopped halfway, as though whoever was on the other side was waiting for me to move. I backed toward the far wall, eyes fixed on the door. My heart thudded so hard, I thought it would shake the frame apart. Then nothing. The handle released. The door stayed shut. I waited. A minute. 2. 5. The hum of the ship was the only sound left. When I finally worked up the courage to step closer, I threw the bolt back into place. My hands were trembling so badly, I almost missed the groove. I didn't sleep at all that night. I just sat at the small desk, staring at the door, waiting for it to move again. By morning, the ship looked normal. Too normal. Breakfast in the dining hall, sunlight streaming through wide windows, families laughing. Everyone carried on like nothing was wrong, like there wasn't something beneath our feet that should never have been disturbed. I thought maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe exhaustion and too many beers the night before were messing with me. But when I checked my pocket again, the paper was still there. The same thick black letters staring back. We're not alone. That was when I decided to test if I was really losing my mind. At lunch, I found a couple sitting alone at the edge of the dining hall. They looked about my age, mid-30s. The guy wore a Cubs cap. The woman was scrolling on her phone. I sat down across from them without asking. Sorry, I began, my voice low. Have you noticed anything strange on this ship? The woman frowned, about to respond, but the man shot me a sharp look. A warning glance, almost. Don't talk about it here, he said under his breath. That one sentence hit me harder than anything. So, it wasn't just me. I leaned in. You've seen them too. He nodded once, quick and nervous. Hallways that shouldn't exist. Doors that don't lead anywhere. Don't say more. Just keep your head down. The woman was still watching the room, her jaw tight. She whispered, They notice when you notice. I swallowed hard, my stomach dropping. Before I could ask anything else, a loud announcement boomed over the PA system, making us all jump. Attention passengers, please enjoy our midday deck activities and buffet service beginning at 12 o'clock. A reminder certain areas remain restricted for your safety. Thank you. The man slid his tray away and stood. Forget this conversation. But I couldn't forget. Not after the night I'd had. Not after the whispering, the mirror, the phone call. Later, back in my cabin, I finally made myself do something reckless. I dialed the phone. Not my cell, the ship's phone. I punched in the 4-digit number listed on the emergency placard for guest services. A voice answered. Not cheerful, not professional. Just a flat, breathless rasp. We told you not to go down there. The line cut again before I could respond. That was the moment I knew. Whatever was happening wasn't a dream or a trick of the lights. Something was watching me. And the worst part? It wasn't just watching me. It was listening. I should have stopped there. I should have packed my bag, handed my key back, and told the first crew member I saw that I wanted off the ship. Instead, curiosity stupid, insistent curiosity kept me moving. I slid the cabin door closed and locked it. But the feeling of being observed didn't leave. It sat at the base of my skull, like a cold coin. I paced the room until the tiny television's travelogue turned into static and the engine's steady throbbing became a metronome for the panic in my chest. Twice, I opened the door just to prove to myself the hallway was empty. Twice, there was nothing but the faint odor of disinfectant and coffee. On the third time, someone had left a pair of sunglasses on the floor outside my door. Not in the middle of the hall right there, as if someone had been watching me through the peephole and then dropped them in a hurry. They were expensive looking, Warby Parker or something, the lenses smudged with fingerprints that weren't mine. I picked them up with 2 fingers and pocketed them. They felt warm, as if someone had just been holding them. The ship announced a cocktail hour that evening, but I skipped it. I needed answers, not people who smiled like they'd been given a script. I slipped into a service corridor that the crew sign said, "Authorized personnel only." The door was half ajar, and I pushed through with the kind of breathless determination that feels brave in the moment and foolish in the aftermath. The service corridors smell like oil and lemon cleaner. They have that particular echo that eats sound. I followed the hum of the ventilation until I reached a steel door that had been taped over with an out-of-service sign. Someone had peeled the tape back. A faint trail of wet footprints led away from the gap. Small, like someone in socks. I crouched and peered inside. The room beyond was a maintenance alcove boxes, coiled hoses, a mop bucket. A cart rolled slowly a few feet in, then stopped as if an invisible hand had given it a push. My breath stalled. Footsteps approached behind me, soft at first, then purposeful. I flattened against the wall, heart hammering, and prayed the shadow slipping past my peripheral vision would ignore me. The hallway emptied. No one stopped. The air tasted metallic, and for a moment I thought of tides and rust and the way the sea eats metal if you leave it long enough. By the time I found security, my hands were shaking too hard to grip the tablet the officer offered. He was young, one of those officers who looked like he wanted to be anywhere but here. His eyes flicked over me and then away like he was checking for a camera. "Anything wrong, sir?" he asked. "Someone's missing," I said. "Last night, I heard there was a knock, someone was at my door, and the corridor people are acting weird. There was a note under my door. I didn't mention the sunglasses." He typed something slowly into the tablet, the screen bright. "We've had reports of missing small items," he said, as if reading a prepared line. "And some guests experience disorientation on long voyages. We recommend staying within public areas and notifying your cabin steward for anything unusual. Missing small items?" I repeated. "You mean sunglasses?" He smiled thinly. "Yes, sometimes guests misplace things, sir. We can run a lost and found check. Someone knocked and then disappeared," I said. There were footprints. He paused, his hands still. For a second, I thought he might ask questions, call a supervisor, escalate. Instead, he closed the tablet gently and looked at me with tired eyes. "Sir, for safety and liability, the manifest is the manifest. If a passenger is truly missing, we will make an announcement and notify authorities at port. Until then, try to enjoy your cruise." That was his cover-up, flat, officious, and practiced. The kind of refusal you get when the thing you ask about is either impossible or sanctioned. He walked away, radio clicking at his hip. I watched his back until it disappeared around a corner. If this was a performance, everyone on board had learned their cues. I spent the next 2 hours retracing my steps. I visited the places that should have been mundane. The library, the small chapel, the squash court where the floor made a certain hollow thunk when you bounced a ball. Everywhere, the same suggestion, normalcy. Laughs that were almost on beat, music fading like someone hit the dimmer a notch too early. People nodded, but didn't linger in conversation. If I asked a direct question, they answered politely, then walked away like the conversation had exhausted them. On the third walkthrough, I found the couple from lunch again, sitting at the stern where the cold wind cut the deck. The man dropped his hand and slid off his cap, revealing a scar that ran behind his ear. When I sat, the woman didn't look at me. She stared at the horizon as if the ocean could spit up answers. "You should leave," she said without turning. "Not because of what's happening on the ship, but because of what happens after." "After what?" I pressed. She turned then, very slowly, eyes glassy. "After you notice, after you start looking. They don't like being noticed. I thought of soldiers who warn you, don't go near the wire." The idea of being marked by attention, by the act of seeing, sat like a stone in my stomach. It was a feeling, not a fact yet, but it wanted to become one. "How do you know?" I whispered. She let out a breath that could have been a laugh. "You don't see them unless they let you," she said. "And once you see, you're not the same." I watched her fingers drum the rail. She shoved her cap into my hands and stood leaving it with me like an omen. "Keep it," she said. "Maybe if you keep someone else's things, they won't take your own." I left the cap on my shelf that night. It smelled faintly of cigarettes and ocean spray. Around midnight the next night, the ship announced a curfew for non-essential public areas. The wording was careful. In light of unforeseen safety concerns, passengers are advised to return to cabins. It sounded like a thin bluff. The public areas emptied, like someone had pulled a curtain. The engine's hum became a tide in my bones. I heard a name then, soft, like someone letting a secret slip. It threaded through the hull, through the vents, until it found my ear. Lorrigan. I didn't know a Lorrigan. No one did. But the name felt ancient, like a captain who once steered into storms, or a ship that had been renamed until no one could remember its first. I lay awake, eyes open to the darkness beyond the balcony water black, and the occasional blink of a distant navigation light. The cabin felt too small, like a throat. I heard something scrape across the deck and froze. The chain on the door rattled the way chains do when they test you. When I looked through the peephole, the corridor was empty. But someone had drawn a single straight line across the carpet white powder, chalk leading from my door to the stairwell. The next morning, the stairwell was sealed, maintenance tape crisscrossing the entrance. A staff member stood nearby, eyes down, and a cruise guest crossed the deck as if nothing had happened. On the maintenance tape, someone had scrawled in hurried black marker, "Do not pass." I laughed then, a short, thin sound that surprised me. I thought I was done being frightened. But fear has a way of keeping its own calendar, and the ship was a patient student. I decided to go back to the theater. The pale man, the photograph, if this was orchestrated. The theater was where people met who weren't supposed to meet. The theater smelled of stale popcorn and cleaning solvent. A single spotlight remained on the stage, a circle of harsh white that made the audience seats recede into black. A woman sat alone in the front row, face eliminated by shadow. She turned to me without sound and slid the damp photograph across the armrest. "You keep finding things people don't want you to find," she whispered finally. Her voice was the same as the voice on the phone the night before. "They prefer the quiet. There's a name they say sometimes," I told her. "Lorrigan. Have you heard it?" She smiled, and it was the kind of smile you save for strangers so they don't know the worry under your teeth. "Names are useful," she said. "Call it what you like. The method is consistent." "What is the method?" I asked. Her hand hovered over the photograph, and the theater went entirely dead quiet. No sound of the ship, no distant announcements, nothing. For a heartbeat, I almost believed there was no ocean at all. "They arranged the stage," she said softly. They give you actors, props. They test you with small things: missing glasses, a call at night, a reflection in a mirror. If you notice the pattern, you're enticed to look deeper. If you persist, they rewrite the scenery. You become the scene. Is anyone getting off? I asked, because even the question sounded like a prayer. She shook her head. Those who leave forget why they left. They become passengers again, smiling on another voyage. But some become the crew of attention. They watch. They record. They feed it. The lights above us flickered, quick and deliberate, and in the flicker I saw faces flash images of passengers I'd seen frozen 1 second earlier. The theater's curtains breathed like lungs. I felt dizzy, like I'd been staring at a false horizon. If you're listening, I murmured then before I could stop myself, because some old reflex told me to document and warn. Take a second to subscribe to Midnight Outcry. It helps keep stories like this alive. The woman's eyes went distant, and for the first time she looked afraid, not resigned. She reached out and gripped my wrist with a hand that was cold and damp, like something that had been in the water too long. Don't trust your diary, she said. Don't write what you think you did. Keep it simple. Remember why you came. Leave before it notices you properly. I walked back to my cabin with the photograph in my pocket. It showed a knot of passengers on the gangway of some older ship, faces blurred, a gentleman in a navy suit at the edge, always at the edge. When I compared it to recent shots in magazines, I couldn't find a match. It was like a ghost of an itinerary no one remembered taking. That night, the knocking returned, 3 slow times, then a pause, then 2. I didn't answer. The handle turned anyway. The door didn't open. But outside in the corridor, someone or something paced back and forth. The footfalls were too precise, like a metronome. In the rhythm, I thought I heard too low to be human. There was counting. I pressed my back to the door and left my hand on the chain until it ached. I thought of the couple at the stern. They notice when you notice. I thought of the man who'd told me to keep my head down. I thought of a ship that had a memory, and of passengers who had stopped being passengers. And somewhere far below, the engine thrummed as if in agreement. The ship kept time. The ship waited. The ship recorded. I knew then the real danger wasn't the knocking or the shadow. It was being cataloged, noticed in a way that made you part of the architecture. Once you were noticed enough, well, you didn't leave quite the same. I switched the light off, pulled the bed cover up to my chin, and tried to breathe through the terror. I tried to be practical. I cataloged what I'd seen, what I'd felt, what I'd been told. I tried to make an exit map in my head. I told myself not to look at reflections, not to answer the door, not to follow the chalk lines. I told myself 100 things to keep myself sane. Then the bathroom mirror fogged on its own. Letters formed in the condensation, 3 slow, a pause, 2 quick. The same pattern, the same counting, the same promise that someone or something was patient. I woke before dawn. The balcony door was open. The sea outside had no stars. The night swallowed the horizon whole. A shape moved on the water, just a dark suggestion, unformed. It paused and turned like a head looking up. For a second, I almost understood what the stern woman had meant by after you notice. After you notice, you become watchful. And watchfulness is currency here. I packed when the lights finally came on, my hands steady, as if on autopilot. I slipped the photograph into the pocket of my jeans and wrapped the cap around it like a talisman. The corridor felt sharper, angles distinct as freshly cut metal. I didn't know where I was going. The ship had folded itself in ways I could not predict. I only had one firm belief. If you stay and watch long enough, the ship learns your face, learns your patterns, writes you into the log. I wasn't ready to be written. As I stepped into the bright hum of morning, passengers already queued for the buffet with polite smiles, oblivious. A child skipped by, holding a waxy candy. The couple at the stern had vanished without a trace. A crewman, same young one from security, checked his tablet and looked at me for a heartbeat, like a man who briefly remembered an earlier life. He nodded once, not to me, but to the corridor. There are 2 kinds of nods on a ship like this. The friendly kind, and the kind that acknowledges the inevitable. His was the second. I turned and walked into the crowd, a man with sunglasses and a damp photograph in his pocket, trying to decide whether leaving was a matter of timing or luck. The ocean hummed under our souls. The ship sailed on, indifferent and perfect and patient. And somewhere between the deck and the dark, I heard the counting again, 3 slow, a pause, too quick, like someone marking the moments until the next passenger looked too long. Story 4. The first time I saw him, he was already staring at me. It wasn't casual eye contact, not the kind you exchange in passing with a stranger. No, his gaze locked onto me like I was the only person on the ship. His face was pale, drained of all warmth, and his clothes didn't match the rest of the passengers. He wore something outdated, like an old-fashioned suit with a tie too tight around his neck, the kind you'd expect in a black and white photograph. And here's the detail that's burned into me even now. His hair was dripping wet. My name's Evan Miller. I'm 31, and I work as a financial advisor out of Denver, Colorado. After my mom passed away earlier this year, I booked this 7-day cruise. I told myself it was a way to clear my head, to reset before diving back into life. But if I'm honest, it was just me running away. I wasn't used to traveling alone, and cruises were supposed to be safe. Predictable. The glossy brochures promised endless buffets, shows, bright casinos, and crowded pools. The kind of place where being alone didn't feel so lonely. At least, that's what I thought. The ship was massive, 12 decks. Over 4,000 passengers. Endless corridors that all looked the same. I boarded with the crowd in Miami, waved to the photographers at the gangway, and by the time I found my cabin on Deck 7, I was exhausted. Cabin 723. That's where I stayed. But the man I saw that night, he wasn't supposed to be in 724, because according to the front desk, that cabin was empty. The first night passed uneventfully. I ate dinner at the buffet, wandered the deck, and fell asleep to the low hum of the engines. But the second night, everything changed. It was close to midnight when I came back to my cabin. I'd spent a while at the bar, trying to loosen up with a couple of drinks, maybe strike up some conversation, but nothing stuck. People were in their groups, their families, their honeymoon bubbles. I slipped away unnoticed. The hallway was quiet, lit by those soft golden sconces that cast more shadow than light. The carpet muffled my footsteps as I reached my door, and that's when I saw him, the man standing in front of cabin 724. His skin looked clammy, stretched too tight across his cheeks. Water dripped steadily from his hair, darkening the carpet beneath his shoes. His hands hung at his sides, stiff, like he didn't know how to use them anymore, and he stared right at me. I froze. My keycard shook in my hand. Hey, I muttered, trying to brush it off, like maybe he was just drunk or lost. But he didn't answer, didn't blink, didn't move, just stared. The silence in that hallway pressed against my ears, heavier than the ocean outside. My throat tightened as I fumbled with the keycard and shoved myself inside cabin 723, slamming the door behind me. For a long time, I leaned against it, heart pounding, listening for footsteps, but I never heard him leave. That was the start, and by the end of this cruise, I'd learned that cabin 724 wasn't empty at all, because the man inside it, he'd been here far longer than any of us. I didn't sleep well that night. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw him again, the water dripping from his hair, the way his gaze felt like it pierced through the door even after I locked it. The hum of the engines beneath my floor vibrated in my chest like a second heartbeat, making me feel more awake than I wanted to be. At some point, exhaustion finally dragged me under, but my dreams weren't my own. I dreamt of water seeping under my cabin door, filling the carpet, rising past my bed until I was gasping for breath. In the dream, when I opened the door to escape, the hallway wasn't there anymore. Just an endless black ocean stretching in every direction. And floating in it his face, eyes wide open, mouth moving, but no sound. When I woke, my sheets were damp with sweat. The digital clock glowed 3:17 a.m. And from the other side of the wall, cabin 724, I swore I heard a knock. The morning was almost worse than the night, because daylight has a way of making you feel stupid about fear. The hallway looked normal again. Passengers passed by in swimsuits, holding pool towels and iced coffees. A kid ran ahead of his parents, laughing, smacking his hand against random cabin doors, including mine, without a care in the world. There was no water damage in the carpet outside 724. No trace of the dripping man. For a second, I almost believed I imagined it. Still, I couldn't shake the unease. After breakfast, I went to the front desk in the main lobby. "Hi," I said, keeping my voice casual. "Can you tell me who's in cabin 724? The crew member smiled politely, typing on her screen. "One moment, sir." I watched her eyes flick across the monitor. Her fingers froze. Then she blinked too quickly and adjusted the screen angle. "Cabin 724 is unoccupied, sir." I frowned. "Are you sure? I saw someone there last night." She shook her head, smile fixed, but a little too stiff. "No guest is assigned to that cabin this voyage. If you have concerns, I'll notify security." Her tone told me the conversation was over, but as I walked away, I glanced back. She was still staring at the screen, and her hand trembled slightly on the keyboard. That afternoon, I tried to force myself into vacation mode. I sat by the pool, drank a watered-down cocktail, listened to a steel drum band play for sunburnt tourists. But every time I glanced up at the rows of balconies above, I felt like I was being watched. Once, just once, I caught a figure on the Deck 7 railing, leaning against it, pale, wet. When I blinked, he was gone. That night, I couldn't bring myself to sleep right away. I sat in bed with the TV on low volume, flipping through the ship's channels, safety videos, upcoming shows, live camera feeds of the ocean. And then the TV glitched. For less than a second, the feed flickered. Instead of the ocean, I saw the hallway outside my room, cabin 724's door, and standing in front of it, him, head tilted, staring into the camera. The screen cut back to ocean waves before I could process it. I scrambled for the remote, flipping back and forth between channels. Nothing, just blue water. But I couldn't ignore it, because for the first time, he wasn't staring at me. He was staring at the camera, like he knew I was watching. I don't know why I did it. Maybe some part of me thought if I faced it head on, it would lose power. Maybe it was plain stupidity. But at 4 a.m., I opened my door and stepped into the hallway. Cabin 724 waited. Its door looked identical to mine, same number plaque, same brass handle. But as I drew closer, the air around it felt colder, heavier. The hairs on my arms stood on end. I lifted my hand. Knocked once. The sound echoed too loud in the silence. No response. I tried the handle. It turned. The door swung inward with a slow creak, revealing a darkness so deep it felt alive. The smell hit me first. Salt water. Rotting seaweed. Something metallic, like rust or blood. "Hello?" My voice cracked. And then, deep inside that darkness, I heard it. A splash, followed by the steady sound of water dripping onto carpet. I don't know how long I stood there, staring into the dark of cabin 724. My instincts screamed at me to shut the door, walk away, and pretend I never opened it. But something stronger, a mix of dread and curiosity, kept me frozen on the threshold. The smell of salt, water, and rust clung to my throat. My eyes adjusted slowly, and I realized there was no bed inside, no furniture at all. Just a bare cabin with soggy carpet, dark stains spreading outward like tide marks. And then I heard it again. Drip, drip, drip. Water leaked steadily from the ceiling. Even though there were no pipes overhead, the sound pulled me deeper into the room. "Hello?" I whispered again, though my voice was smaller this time. Something shifted in the corner. I spun, heart hammering, but saw nothing but shadow. The door creaked behind me. My pulse spiked. I didn't close it, but it was shutting slowly on its own. I lunged back, grabbing the handle before it sealed me in. The hallway light spilled over my shoulder, a faint lifeline. That's when I saw it. The carpet near the far wall wasn't just wet, it was moving, rippling like the surface of water disturbed by a current. I stepped back instinctively, my heel hitting the doorframe. The smell of brine thickened, stinging my nostrils. And then I heard a voice, not loud, not clear, just a whisper tangled with the hum of the engines. Stay with us. I bolted. I didn't even think. I slammed the door, twisted the lock, and sprinted back into my own cabin, chest heaving, adrenaline buzzing through my veins. I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat against the wall opposite 724, eyes fixed on its door, waiting for movement, waiting for him. At some point, maybe 2, maybe 3 a.m., the air changed. Colder. The ship's steady hum dipped, like the engines were groaning under a new weight. And from inside cabin 724 came a knock. Not at the door, at the wall we shared. 3 slow knocks. I pressed my hand against the wallpaper. It was damp, ice cold. Then, faintly, beneath my palm, I felt it another hand pressing back. I yanked away like I'd been burned. Morning brought no peace. I dragged myself to breakfast, eyes bloodshot, appetite gone. The passengers around me laughed, carefree, sipping mimosas. No one else seemed to notice the ship felt wrong. I decided to try again at the front desk. Different crew member this time. Listen, I said, voice low. Cabin 724 isn't empty. Someone's in there. I saw. The man cut me off with a sharp shake of his head. His polite smile never wavered, but his eyes were wide, warning. Sir, he said firmly, 724 does not exist. I blinked. What are you talking about? It's right next to my cabin. His smile twitched. His voice dropped just slightly. For your own good, stop looking for it. Before I could reply, another guest appeared at the counter. The crew member turned away, as if our conversation had never happened. But his hands, they were shaking. That night, I tried to distract myself with a show in the theater. A magician pulling doves out of hats, couples clapping, laughter filling the room. For the first time since boarding, I felt almost normal, until the finale. The magician asked for a volunteer. A man stepped on stage from the aisle near me, pale, wet. His clothes clung to him as though he'd just climbed from the ocean. And when the spotlight hit his face, my stomach dropped. It was him. The dripping man from 724. The audience clapped and laughed like nothing was wrong. I wanted to scream, to shout that he wasn't supposed to be here. The magician asked his name. The man leaned into the mic, voice echoing through the theater. Passenger. Miller. The name didn't belong to me, but it sent a chill through my bones like he'd spoken it to me. The crowd laughed, as if it were part of the act, but I knew better. Because when his eyes found mine in the audience, they didn't let go. And he smiled. A slow, waterlogged smile. I couldn't get that moment out of my head. The theater erupted with laughter and applause, but I just sat there, frozen in my seat. His wet hair clung to his forehead, rivulets of water dripping onto the stage floor. The magician carried on with the trick, but all I could see was the puddle spreading at his feet, and no one else reacted. Not the magician, not the audience, only me. I left halfway through, my skin crawling, pulse pounding in my ears. The ship's corridors felt even more claustrophobic that night, lights flickering as though struggling against the hum of the engines. By the time I reached my cabin, I was sweating through my shirt. I locked the door, double-checked it, then sat on the bed, staring at the wall I shared with 724. It didn't take long. The knocks came again. 3 slow knocks. Stop, I whispered, pressing my palms to my ears. But the knocks grew louder, closer, until it sounded like they weren't just coming from the wall, but from inside my cabin itself. I stumbled back, heart hammering. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I grabbed it, desperate for some distraction. One new text, no number, no contact, just a message. Let us in. I dropped the phone like it burned me. And then the smell hit salt water and rot, stronger than ever. My carpet was damp beneath my feet. That's when I realized the sound of dripping was coming from my bathroom. I crept toward the door, every instinct telling me not to look, but I had to. I pushed it open. The sink faucet was bone dry, the shower head too, but water pooled on the floor, dark, brackish, reeking of rust and seawater. And in the mirror above the sink, he was standing behind me. The man from 724. His eyes hollow, his skin pale, his smile impossibly wide. I spun around nothing, only the damp, empty bathroom. But when I looked back at the mirror, he was still there, watching me. The next day, I tried to act normal. Breakfast, coffee, small talk with passengers I didn't know. But it was like living inside a nightmare I couldn't wake from, because he was everywhere. At the buffet line, dripping onto the carpet unnoticed by anyone else. By the pool deck, standing ankle-deep in water no one else seemed to see. In the reflection of every damn window I passed. And each time, he was closer. By lunch, I'd had enough. I cornered a crew member in a hallway, an older woman with kind eyes and a strained smile. "There's someone following me," I blurted. "Cabin 724. A man. He's everywhere. Her smile vanished instantly. She gripped my wrist so hard it hurt. "Stop talking about him," she hissed. Her eyes darted around, making sure no one was listening. "You'll only draw him closer." "I already see him," I whispered. Her face paled. She let go of my wrist, turned sharply, and walked away without another word. That's when I knew I wasn't crazy. Something about 724, about him, was real. And I was in too deep. That night, I made a decision. I would open 724 again. The ship's hum was louder than usual, vibrating through the floors as though it disapproved. My keycard trembled in my hand as I slid it into the lock. The door opened without resistance. Inside, the cabin was darker, wetter than before. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, pooling on the floor. The smell of rot was suffocating, and this time, he was waiting. Not a reflection, not a glimpse. He stood in the center of the room, water streaming down his face, eyes locked on mine. "You shouldn't have come back," he said, his voice a gurgle of seawater and whispers. I froze, my throat dry, my body screaming to run, but my feet nailed to the floor. "What do you want?" I managed. His smile widened, revealing teeth too sharp, too many. "To stay," he whispered. "To watch, to bring you in." The water on the floor rippled, rising higher, climbing my shoes, my ankles, pulling me toward him. I fought, clawing at the doorframe, but the water dragged harder, stronger, like invisible hands pulling me under. He stepped closer, and I saw it then. His face was mine, older, hollow. "You've already stayed too long," he whispered. The door slammed shut behind me, and the lights went out. Darkness swallowed me whole. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The water wasn't just pooling at my feet anymore. It was rising, rushing, pulling me deeper into 724. The floor was gone, replaced by a black ocean that stretched forever, and he was standing on its surface. The man, my reflection, older, ruined, watched as I struggled. Each time I clawed upward, the water thickened, becoming like tar. My lungs burned, panic clawing at my chest. Then, through the roar of the water, came the whispers. Not just his voice, hundreds of voices, layered, echoing, overlapping. "Stay, watch, don't resist." I fought harder, my mind screaming no. That's when I saw them. Figures, countless of them, drifting just beneath the surface. Passengers, crew, families. Their eyes open, mouths moving soundlessly. Their faces blurred, melting into one another. Each one trapped in an eternal loop of drowning and staring. And among them, I saw myself. Not the reflection, not the hollow-eyed man. It was me. Present-day me. Mouth open in a silent scream. Somehow, I broke free. My body lurched upward, choking, gasping. I slammed against the cabin wall, coughing seawater onto the floor. The lights flickered back on. Cabin 724 was empty. The puddles were gone. The smell of rot, the dripping water, everything had vanished. It looked Normal. Too normal. Except for the mirror. I dragged myself to my feet and turned. The man was still there, staring at me. But this time, he wasn't smiling. His expression was hollow, resigned, like a prisoner waiting for a cell door to shut. And then I realized he wasn't behind me. He was me. The reflection raised its hands slowly, not in threat, in warning. 3 knocks rattled the wall. I staggered backward, yanked the door open, and fled into the corridor. The rest of the cruise passed in a blur. Passengers laughed, drank, sunbathed. Crew smiled and served. Everything looked normal, but it wasn't. Every reflective surface I passed showed him standing behind me, waiting, sometimes dripping, sometimes whispering, always there. On the final night, as the ship neared port, I stood on the deck, staring at the coastline lights flickering in the distance. Land, safety. But deep down I knew, you don't leave 724. Not really. You carry it. I'm home now, back in Boston. My apartment looks the same, my routine's familiar. But mirrors still ripple with seawater when I glance too long. My phone buzzes with messages I never sent. And at night, when everything is quiet, I hear it. 3. Slow. Knocks. On the wall beside my bed. I know I should ignore them, pretend they aren't real, but curiosity always wins. And when I finally open the door, because I know I will, I don't think I'll be in Boston anymore. I'll be back on the Ocean Sovereign, back in 724, waiting for the next passenger to notice. If you're listening to this right now, don't brush it off. Don't laugh it away. These aren't stories. They're warnings. Real encounters, real voices collected, retold, and verified from places you'd never expect. And if you ever book a cruise, remember this. Sometimes a locked door should stay locked. Dim the lights. Subscribe to Midnight Outcry. Ring the bell so you don't miss what comes next. And if you've ever experienced something like this, leave a comment. We'll be watching. Story 5. The first time I saw her, she was standing at the far end of the corridor, head slightly tilted, staring at me as if she already knew my name. I should have turned around. I should have taken that moment as a warning and walked back to my cabin. But instead, I froze, half convinced that maybe my eyes were playing tricks in the low glow of the hallway lights. She didn't move. She didn't blink. And by the time I blinked, she was gone. My name is Eric Marshall. I'm 34 years old, and I've been working as a middle school history teacher in Cleveland, Ohio for the past 9 years. On paper, I'm ordinary. A steady job, a modest apartment, no spouse, no kids, just me trying to make life feel a little less predictable. That's why I booked this cruise. It was supposed to be my first real vacation in almost 5 years. A week-long solo trip on a mid-sized ship heading from Florida to the Caribbean. My friends said it would be good for me to get out, to shake the dust off. And they were right. I was burnt out. The classroom had been draining me, and the thought of staring at ocean water instead of lesson plans sounded like the reset I desperately needed. I'm not the adventurous type, not really, but I like observing, watching, taking in people and places. That's part of why I chose a cruise where everything is self-contained, and you can slip into the background without anyone noticing. At least, that's what I thought. From the very first night, things didn't feel right. The corridors on this ship were unusually long, stretching on in ways that felt almost distorted. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly, flickering every so often like they were struggling to hold back the dark. And there was this sound, subtle but constant, that I couldn't pin down. It wasn't the hum of the engines. It wasn't the shuffle of passengers. It was softer, like a whisper you couldn't quite catch. And then, of course, there was her. That first night, I left the buffet late, full and tired, and started back toward my cabin on deck 7. The hallway was empty, except for the faint sway of the ship and the low creak of metal underfoot. I remember thinking how peaceful it felt, that in a place with thousands of people, you could still find stretches of silence. Then I looked up. She was at the far end, maybe 40 feet away. A young woman, mid-20s at most, wearing what looked like a faded sundress. Her hair was damp, clinging to her neck, as if she'd just stepped out of the ocean. And her head was tilted slightly, like she was listening to something only she could hear. I froze. I don't know how long I stood there, watching. Long enough for my brain to start catching up with my eyes. Long enough to feel the hairs rise on the back of my neck. Then, in the blink of an eye, she was gone. No footsteps. No cabin door shutting. Just gone. I told myself I was tired. That maybe she ducked into a room I hadn't noticed. Ships can play tricks on your perception. Too many repeating doors, too much fluorescent light. That had to be it. But that was just the beginning. By the second day, I started to notice the pattern. I'd catch a reflection in a window when no one was there. I'd see her seated alone at a dining table, only for the chair to be empty when I blinked. Once, passing by the pool deck, I saw her sitting on the edge with her legs dangling over the water, dripping wet. Except the pool was closed, covered, and completely still. I didn't talk to anyone about it. Not yet. What would I even say? That some woman kept appearing and disappearing around me? That didn't sound like exhaustion anymore. That sounded like madness. Still, by the third night, I couldn't shake the thought that she wasn't just random. She wasn't haunting the ship. She was haunting me. And when she finally spoke, I realized how wrong I'd been about everything. The fourth night on the cruise is when my sense of "this is just in my head" started to collapse. I was walking back to my cabin after a late comedy show in the ship's lounge. The air in the corridors felt different that night. Stale, almost humid, like the ventilation wasn't working right. My shirt clung to me, and the overhead lights hummed in a way that drilled straight into my skull. Halfway down the hallway, I heard it. A voice. Not clear, not words exactly, but a cadence like someone whispering just out of reach. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs as I scanned the corridor. Empty. I stood still long enough that I started to feel foolish. Then I took a step forward. That's when I heard it again. Louder this time. Eric. I swear to God it said my name. My throat went dry. I spun around, eyes darting over every closed cabin door, every flickering bulb. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't half asleep. Someone had said my name. And then I saw her again. She was standing in the middle of the hallway, no more than 20 feet away. The same damp hair, the same faded sundress. Only now, her eyes. Her eyes looked swollen, as though she'd been underwater too long. "Eric," she said again, lips barely moving. I stumbled back a step, my shoulder hitting the wall. I opened my mouth to demand who she was, what she wanted, but before I could speak, she tilted her head and smiled. A sharp, unnatural smile. Then she was gone. No sound of retreat, no door closing. Just gone. I bolted the rest of the way to my cabin, fumbling with the keycard like a man whose life depended on it. Once inside, I slid the deadbolt across and collapsed onto the bed, chest heaving. I kept the lights on that night. The next morning, over breakfast in the buffet hall, I convinced myself it had to be stress, maybe even sleep deprivation. I'd read once that your brain can project faces when you're exhausted. That had to be it. But then I overheard something that made my stomach drop. At the table behind me, two older women were chatting, their voices low but animated. "You heard about the girl who drowned," one whispered. The other gasped softly. "Last year, wasn't it? The young one?" "Yeah. Cabin near the middle decks. Went missing for 2 days before they found her. Said she'd gone overboard, but some passengers swore they saw her walking the halls even after she died. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. A drowned girl. Seen walking the halls. I didn't turn around. I didn't want them to see my face, but my pulse hammered in my ears because everything they just said aligned with what I had been seeing. She wasn't just some hallucination. She had a story, a death, a presence still clinging to this ship. And for some reason, she'd chosen me. I didn't want to believe it. Not really. So, I started testing myself, keeping notes. Every time I saw her, I jotted down the time, the place, what she looked like. My little notebook filled up fast. Pool deck, 11:47. Me legs dangling, dripping wet. Corridor, deck 7, 12A, Amy, staring, smiling. Dining hall reflection, 6:35 p.m. Visible only in the window. Patterns emerged. She appeared most at night. She always looked wet, always in that same sundress. And always she was silent, except for the times she said my name. That's what gnawed at me the most. How did she know me? I told no one my name on this ship other than staff. I kept to myself. I didn't mingle, didn't chat with strangers. I wanted this to be a week of silence. And yet, she knew me. She called to me like she'd been waiting. And the more I saw her, the less it felt like she wanted to scare me. No, she wanted something else. The thought festered in my brain until I couldn't ignore it anymore. So, on the 6th night, I did something stupid. I spoke to her. It was close to midnight when I heard the whisper again, soft as ever. I turned, and there she was, standing at the far end of the corridor. The flickering light overhead made her skin look bluish, mottled, waterlogged. My voice trembled when I said, "What do you want from me?" She didn't move, didn't blink. So I stepped closer, just 1 foot forward, then another. "Why me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Why me?" That's when her lips parted. The words that came out were wet, gurgling, like they were dragged through water. "Help me." And just like that, she vanished. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. My brain reeled with the weight of those 2 words. She didn't want to scare me. She wanted my help. But help with what? And how? The next day, I finally broke. I had to tell someone. I tracked down one of the ship's crew members, a younger guy in a crisp uniform, and cornered him near the staff-only door by the dining hall. I tried to keep my voice low, but panic made it come out rushed, breathless. "There's a woman on this ship," I said. "She drowned last year. People are saying they've seen her walking the halls. I've seen her. I've seen her for days." The young crewman's expression changed instantly. His polite smile faltered, and his eyes flicked nervously to the hallway behind me. "You shouldn't talk about that," he said quickly. His voice had dropped low, urgent. "Just don't, for your own sake." And then he pushed past me, disappearing through the staff door without another word. I stood there, stunned. For my own sake. What the hell did that mean? That night, I heard her again. Only this time, she wasn't in the hallway. She was inside my cabin. I woke to the sound of water dripping. Not the occasional creak of the hull, or the faint thrum of engines I'd grown used to. No. This was steady, deliberate. A single drip hitting the carpet every 3 seconds. My eyes snapped open. The cabin lights were still on. I hadn't dared switch them off, but the shadows seemed longer, darker, somehow thicker than before. And there she was, standing in the corner of my room. Her sundress clung to her body like it had just been pulled from the ocean. Drops of water fell from her fingertips, landing in a dark patch on the carpet. Her hair, stringy and matted, framed a face that was no longer just pale. It was bloated, swollen, her lips tinged blue. I froze. Every muscle in my body locked. She didn't move toward me. She didn't vanish. She just stood there, her eyes locked on mine, unblinking. "Help me," she said again. But this time, her voice was clearer, like she was closer to remembering how to be alive. I swallowed hard. My voice cracked as I whispered, "How? What do you want me to do?" Her head tilted slowly, water dripping from her chin. Then she raised one trembling hand and pointed toward the door. My heart thundered. "The hallway?" I whispered. Her expression didn't change. She just kept pointing. I slid out of bed, every instinct screaming at me to stay put, to lock the door and never leave. But something stronger pulled me forward, curiosity, maybe, or the sickening thought that if I didn't follow her, she'd never leave me alone. I reached for the handle. My hands shook so badly, I could barely turn it. The door opened with a hiss of air, and I looked back at her. She was gone. Only the wet patch on the carpet proved she'd been there at all. The hallway was empty, but the silence felt wrong, too heavy. as though the air itself was pressing in around me. The carpet squished beneath my bare feet wet, though no one else was around. "Where?" I whispered. "Where do you want me to go?" And then, faintly, I heard it. A knock. It came from the far end of the corridor. 3 slow knocks, muffled, like someone trapped behind a door. I moved toward it before I even realized what I was doing. Each step echoed unnaturally, as though the hallway stretched longer than it should have. The cabin numbers blurred, their brass plaques unreadable in the dim light. When I reached the last door, I froze. It wasn't like the others. This one was old, its paint chipped, the number plate missing. Something about it felt wrong. I lifted my hand. The air was freezing near the handle. My skin prickled, goosebumps racing up my arms. Then from behind the door, I heard it. Her voice. "Eric." My stomach dropped. I twisted the knob. It turned with surprising ease. The door creaked open. It wasn't a cabin. It was a stairwell, spiraling down into darkness. The metal steps were slick with condensation, and the smell of brine and engine oil hit me like a wave. A faint drip echoed endlessly, bouncing off the steel walls. I swallowed hard. Every nerve screamed at me to close the door and run, but then I heard her again, drifting up from below. "Help me!" So I descended. Step after step, the sound of dripping grew louder. The air grew colder. My breath came out in clouds, though we were far from any open deck. Halfway down, I stopped. There was water. A thin sheet of it pooled across the landing, rippling faintly as though disturbed by movement. My bare foot sank into it, icy cold, sending a jolt up my leg. That's when I saw her again. She was crouched at the bottom of the stairs, her wet hair hanging over her face. Her hands clawed weakly at the floor, as though trying to pull herself forward, but every movement splashed water, as if she were still drowning. My chest tightened. I whispered, "Tell me what you want, please." Her head lifted slowly. Her face was barely human anymore, bloated and pale, lips torn where water had swollen the skin. But her eyes locked onto mine with a pleading intensity. She opened her mouth, and a torrent of water poured out, spilling across the stairs, rushing around my ankles. I stumbled back, gripping the railing as the stairwell filled with the sound of rushing tides. Through the gurgling, I caught 2 words: "Find me." Then she dissolved into the water, vanishing completely. The stairwell fell silent. The water stopped rising. I stood there shivering, drenched to the knees, the word echoing in my mind. Find me, but where? And what would I find if I did? The next morning, the ship carried on as though nothing had happened. Passengers laughed on the pool deck, music drifted from the speakers, and waiters passed out drinks like everything was fine. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking through a staged play, that everyone around me was just acting their roles while something darker pulsed beneath the surface. I hadn't slept. My clothes were still damp from the night before, though I couldn't explain that to anyone. If I told them I'd followed a drowned woman into a stairwell that shouldn't exist, they'd think I was insane. But the words wouldn't leave my head. Find me. I couldn't stop replaying them. At breakfast, I sat alone by the window, pushing eggs around my plate. The ocean outside looked wrong too. Still, too dark. Like it wasn't reflecting sunlight so much as swallowing it. "Morning, Mr. Clark." The voice nearly made me jump. It was the same steward I'd noticed the night before, the one with the unsettling smile. His uniform was perfectly pressed, not a wrinkle out of place, but his eyes seemed off. Too glassy, too still. "Everything to your liking?" he asked, tilting his head. "Yes, I lied." He nodded, then leaned closer, his breath unnervingly cold against my ear. "Deck 9 is off limits. You understand, don't you?" I froze. I hadn't mentioned Deck 9 to anyone. "How?" I began, but when I looked up, he was gone. The room buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, but no trace of him remained. I left the dining hall and headed straight for the elevators. My reflection in the brass doors startled me. I looked older, drawn out, my eyes ringed with shadows. When the doors slid open, no one else was inside. I stepped in, heart hammering, and pressed the button for deck 9. The light didn't turn on. Instead, the elevator lurched, shuddering violently as if the cables were straining. The floor seemed to fall away beneath me. My stomach dropped. For a moment, I thought the whole box would plummet straight into the ocean. But then the shuddering stopped. The doors slid open. Darkness. The hallway ahead wasn't lit like the others. The carpet was waterlogged, squishing underfoot, and the walls bore strange stains, black and salty. A smell of mildew and rot clung to the air. I stepped out, the doors closing behind me with a final ding. There were no voices, no laughter, no sounds of life. Just the faint drip of water echoing somewhere ahead. I followed it. The corridor bent in ways that made no sense. Angles skewed too sharply. Doors narrowing into impossible shapes. My pulse pounded in my ears. I counted the cabins 902, 903, 904, but then the numbers jumped. 912, 917, and then no number at all. Just a door with peeling paint and rusted edges. The same door from the night before. I pushed it open. This time, it wasn't a stairwell. It was a cabin, or what was left of one. The bed frame was snapped in two, the mattress bloated with seawater. The mirror above the dresser was cracked, warped, as though something inside it had pushed out. A smell of decay and salt filled the room. On the desk lay a stack of papers, passenger logs, damp and smeared. My own name was listed there, circled in crimson ink, and scrawled across the page in shaky handwriting. She is not gone. She is waiting. Find her where the water never drains. I dropped the papers, my hands trembling. The bathroom door creaked open behind me. Water poured out, flooding across the carpet, and then she stepped through. Her dress clung to her body, dripping, her skin pale and bloated. Her lips moved soundlessly at first, then formed the words, "You found me." I stumbled back against the wall, heart slamming against my ribs. "What do you want?" I shouted, her eyes fixed on mine. "To leave." The light flickered violently. The ship groaned, a sound like twisting metal. And then, just as quickly as she appeared, she dissolved into the rushing water, leaving only silence. The cabin door slammed shut behind me, and I realized I wasn't sure it would open again. The silence pressed on me, heavier than the stale, wet air. The cabin door behind me rattled once, then stopped. No handle, no way out. Water crept over my shoes, rising steadily. My breathing turned frantic. I tried forcing the door, it didn't budge. I pounded on it, but the sound came back hollow, like I was knocking from inside a coffin. The mirror over the dresser flickered. At first, it was just me, my reflection, pale and terrified. But then another figure bled into the glass her, the drowned woman, standing behind me, head tilted, eyes wide and unblinking. I spun around. Nothing. Back to the mirror, she was closer now. "Stop," I whispered, gripping the dresser until my knuckles turned white. Her mouth opened. Water poured out. Her voice gurgled through it, layered and broken. "The ship does not let go." I stumbled back, slipping on the soaked carpet. The water was rising faster, ankle deep, swirling as though pulled by some unseen drain. Except there was no drain. It was filling, not emptying. The mirror cracked. A web of fractures spread across it, shards bending the reflection into dozens of versions of her face, all of them staring at me. Then, one by one, the reflections blinked. But I hadn't. I grabbed the log papers from the desk, clutching them like they might anchor me to reality. My name appeared over and over, not just once, pages of it. Passenger Clark, cabin 902. Passenger Clark, deck 9, Passenger Clark. In some, my name was crossed out. In others, it was circled with notes in crimson ink. Observes too closely, knows too much, must stay. The cabin groaned. Water surged higher, waist deep now. I pushed toward the bathroom door, but when I yanked it open, there was no bathroom anymore. Just a black, yawning stairwell, the same one I'd seen last night. The drowned woman's voice whispered up from the darkness, "Help me leave." I should have run, should have screamed, but instead, I stepped into the stairwell, clutching the soaked logbook like it mattered. The water followed me, rushing down the stairs, but the steps didn't descend properly. They tilted sideways, bending at wrong angles. My stomach twisted with vertigo. Halfway down, the hum of the engines shifted. It wasn't mechanical anymore. It was a pulse, beating in rhythm with my own heart. And beneath it, whispers. Dozens of voices, overlapping. Some male, some female. Some familiar voices of passengers I'd spoken to earlier in the cruise. All of them saying the same thing. Stay. I finally reached the bottom. A narrow hall stretched before me, flooded ankle deep, lined with cabin doors. Each one rattled violently, as though something inside wanted out. Water dripped from the ceiling, black and thick, not quite seawater. I moved forward, breath shaky, until I reached the end. One last door stood there, paint peeling, brass plate, corroded but just barely legible. Cabin 0, no number, just a void. I pushed it open. Inside was impossible. The room wasn't a cabin. It was the dining hall, but not the one I knew. Passengers sat frozen at long tables, forks halfway to their mouths, heads slowly turning toward me in unison. At the far end, seated at the captain's table, was her, the drowned woman. She wasn't bloated anymore, not pale. She looked alive, beautiful, almost glowing, in a soaked evening gown. Her eyes locked on mine, and she smiled faintly. "You found me," she said again. Her voice no longer garbled, clear, sharp, commanding. The passengers around her whispered in a single voice, "She must stay. You must stay. Everyone stays." I shook my head, backing toward the door. "No, I'm leaving this ship." Her smile widened. "The ship won't let you." The lights flickered. The passengers rose, every chair scraping back in perfect unison. Their eyes empty, their movements jerky, wrong. And as they closed in, I realized the truth. They weren't passengers at all. They were previous ones. Observers. People like me who had seen too much, who had gone too far, who had followed whispers into places the ship didn't want them to go. And now, the ship had them. And soon, it would have me. The passengers closed in wet shoes, slapping against the flooded floor, eyes blank, movements mechanical. I stumbled back, clutching the logbook to my chest like it could shield me. The drowned woman rose from her chair. Every inch of her shimmered with that sick, dripping glow, like she wasn't solid flesh, but water molded into human form. "You were meant to see," she said. "And once you see, you belong." Her voice wrapped around the room like a rope. The others echoed her. "Belong, belong, belong." I slammed the door shut, heart hammering, and ran back through the hallway of rattling doors. My steps splashed hard through the rising black water. Behind me, the sound of hundreds of wet feet splashing in unison followed. The stairwell twisted again beneath me, pulling me sideways, upward, downward. My balance broke. I crashed against the wall, water soaking my lungs with every gasp. When I looked back, the drowned woman was halfway down the hall, gliding above the water, her feet never touching it. Her eyes locked onto mine. She didn't need to run. She knew the ship would deliver me to her. I finally burst through the top of the stairwell and slammed into another hallway, this one familiar. Deck 9. My deck. I scrambled toward my cabin, soaked, trembling, desperate. The lights flickered overhead, and for a brief second, the hallway seemed empty and normal. I yanked open my cabin door. Inside, everything was as I'd left it. Dry, clean, neat, like none of it had ever happened, except for one detail. On the bed lay the passenger log, open, waiting, my name circled in fresh red ink. I don't know what possessed me, but I sat down. The pen was already there. My hand trembled as I picked it up, fighting against it, fighting against the invisible weight pushing me forward. I could hear them outside the door, feet shuffling, whispering. The drowned woman's voice weaving through them like a song. "It is easier if you don't fight." The logbook stared up at me. There was space for just one more note beneath my name. I don't remember deciding. I don't remember moving my hand. But when I looked down, the words were already written. Stays. Forever. The door behind me clicked open. I didn't turn to look, because the truth had already set in. This wasn't a haunting. This wasn't a ghost story. The ship itself was alive. It fed on us. It lured us with beauty, with luxury, with safety. And once we glimpsed the truth, it kept us. Forever. I was just the latest to join. And if you're listening to this, if you ever board a cruise and hear whispers in the walls, remember my words. Don't follow them. Don't listen. Don't look too closely, because the ship is always hungry, and it's waiting for you.